Hello and welcome to the first episode of Hoopathaticals. I'm your host, Jez F.M. Now, obviously, the show is about basketball hypotheticals. We're going to tackle some different topics each week. This week, I'm joined by Thom Nixon to see what would happen if every team lost its best player. Would the league still be watchable? Is it interesting? As always, Hoopathaticals is around just so I can sell the name. I know people are going to be struggling for content, and I feel like it's a great name. So if you have an offer, please send it to me. Otherwise, feel free to enjoy this episode. Thom and I get into it and have a bit of fun, and he also trash talks Carmelo Anthony like I've never heard. Enjoy that. Welcome to Hoopathaticals, mate.
Thank you. I'm very excited. Feel a little overdressed and underqualified, which is important qualities to have on a audio-only podcast. So,
for those listening at home, Thom is wearing a collared shirt. It's just completely unnecessary for an episode of something that may have upwards of 3 listeners. So, anyway, thanks for buying in, Tommy.
No worries.
Now, I did have one question I did want to ask, and that was, what is the saddest extent you've gone to satisfy your basketball craving while COVID-19 has been on?
I've watched just about every single upload on all social media platforms that the Milwaukee Bucks has put out. That's including a rant of various members of the starting five discussing how they, someone doesn't answer the group chat, Brooke doesn't answer his phone. I watched the whole 5-minute video. It wasn't even highlights. It literally had nothing to do with basketball other than like 4 dudes talking about how they don't answer the group chat, and it still got me there. So
Yeah.
that was this morning. That was mere hours ago. So new lows every day has been my tagline for this. What about yourself?
So I did watch the NBA 2K championship where the actual players played 2K.
I watched the horse competition as well, but that doesn't. I don't know if that's worse. I'm not sure. I can't make a comment on that.
Either way, you could tell it was. I feel like the worst part about the 2K thing. So I have this guy for 2K. His name's Ronnie 2K. He's like the producer of the game, and I feel like he thinks he's got a lot more like swag and clout than he really does. And he was unfortunately the host of the show. And I think the thing that he didn't have as a host was an ability to pad time. Like I think they probably had about a minute between games where he would kind of break down some of the stuff, but his analysis was very basic. So he'd be like, "Yeah, it's a good game from Devin Booker. Anyway, we've got another game coming up in about 2 minutes." So
he's really just making comments that people can see without.
yeah. So, but moral of the story being, I did actually watch all of the Ronnie 2K's analysis, so that
Great.
was pretty low moment.
A self-burn. Those are rare.
Yeah. As people can hopefully tell from the name, Hoopathaticals, the podcast is hypotheticals about basketball. Now, just for people that want to know, I made this, mostly I came up with the name and I thought, if this isn't being used, I'm going to steal it on all platforms. And it wasn't being used, and I did steal it on all platforms. And I'm hoping at one point someone buys this off me for a lot of money. Because what I'm thinking is I'm listening to a lot of basketball podcasts, and they're running out of content by the day. I listened to one that was the 5 worst GM jobs to have. And that's the best podcast that I've listened to in a week.
I'll just for our, again, upwards of 3 listeners, he got it on the platforms of Bebo and MySpace. So please don't think it's confined to just your usual Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Spotify. He really went deep historically.
So that's the point. So if you are listening to this and you do want to buy it, please contact me. It is for sale, though I am taking offer only. I'm not listing a starting price.
Brilliant.
It's a silent auction.
Silent because no one's bidding, but silent nonetheless.
So today's hypothetical. Sorry, let me rephrase it. Today's hypothetical is what if the best player vanished from every team? So what if every team woke up tomorrow and their best player just vanished and they're stuck with the rest of the roster they have? Okay, so we're going to be breaking down what each team looks like, which teams are the most destroyed by this, and ultimately who's still the best team. That's what we're going to try and break down. 2 absolute experts here. So should be a pretty comprehensive analysis, I reckon.
Credentials out the ears, really.
So wait, let's explain just quickly for the 2 listeners other than anybody named Ryan who are listening to this. where we stand in terms of NBA and basketball knowledge.
Great. Okay, I can begin.
Yep.
Next to none, really. I've been playing basketball casually only for,
Mhm.
I'd say, about 10 years.
Mhm.
Never played in a team. I've been following the NBA in general terms for, I'd say, the last 3 to 4 years, but seriously getting deep in the NBA probably I'd say, the last 2 seasons. I've been
Mhm.
progressively so. So it's been an upward trend
Mhm.
of engagement, really. Look, I can talk a lot of crap, and that's more or less why I'm here. And I also I love the game. It's been a short love, but one that won't be looking to end anytime soon. So that's where I'm at.
That's good. And any particular team allegiances you've had in that time, Tommy?
Oh, of course. So I've really only been allied with the Milwaukee Bucks, and that's single-handedly due to your influence, Jeremy.
Mhm. Thank you.
I mean, obviously, Giannis is a big drawing card, but again, over the last couple of seasons, I've really fostered a love for the entire team. So the Bucks, a Bucks tragic is
Yeah.
what I'd be happy to say.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, I'll break down my basketball sort of background. So I started playing basketball at school. So you could say at a sort of amateur level um, in 2006, and then I think you and I both had a brief love of the NBA. I'd say about 2010, 11 with Jeremy Lin. It
Oh
was
yeah,
probably over about a month when he had that Lin Sanity run. We were
that
fully
was
bought in.
insane. Yeah,
Yeah.
we were, and I remember going at the end of basically every day of school, going down to the net courts, and even in lunch times,
Yeah.
playing and discussing Linsanity. What a time!
So that, and then I'd say 2014, 2013, 14. Initially, I think I went for the Clippers. This is a Chris Paul,
Wow.
Blake Griffin Clippers for about 2 months, and then
Ah.
I watched the Bucks lose to the Bulls in the first round. But I loved their heart, and decided it would be them and the Timberwolves, and the Timberwolves just ended up stinking, and the Bucks ended up coming and being great. So drawn to the Bucks. Look, I like to think I'm a bit of a savant, so, it, makes sense. Hence why I went for the Timberwolves for a bit there. Alright, well, let's get cracked into it, because I know people want more of this type of content, but unfortunately, we have to stick the producers are in my ears, and they're telling me,
Yeah.
"We've gotta get to the rest of the material." So, basically, again, the premise of today is we're gonna break down what if the best player vanished from every team. So I've got a small little paragraph here I'd like to, recite
Please do.
from memory. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah. I'm invested. Alright. Many teams in the NBA are two or three-headed beasts, and some are no-headed beasts. To
Great.
understand what would happen to the league if all the best players from each team disappeared, can the second best player step up? Would the league even be watchable? And who is really the most valuable player? Let's look and see what happens to each team and who their best player is. So in front of us, I've got a nice Word document, and I've looked at every team and I've broken down who's the best player, and we can debate some of these, and then who is left on the team as the best player.
Great.
We've done it alphabetically. So first one's Atlanta Hawks. So from that team, Trey Young has to go. I think not. It's not even a discussion. He's the best player on the team.
No, 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 of course not.
Their best player is either John Collins or Clint Capella, which you don't like to see.
Look, as soon as I saw this as the first one, the first thought that came to my head was the Atlanta Hawks, despite Trey Young lighting it up from deep, are still, I believe, if they're not last
Mhm.
in their conference, they're second or third last. They are. I'm just gonna hold on. They are 14 out of 15 in the
The
Eastern
Knicks
Conference.
blow them right out.
You'd be wrong.
Wow.
The Cavaliers. Um,
Excuse me.
that's for this season, which is now obviously on pause. But one could, I mean, heaven forbid, really, the mishmash dog's breakfast of a performance that they would put up. I really hate to cast my mind to such a abysmal display of what I think could barely be called basketball. Really, the less said, the better. Really,
So that Atlanta Hawks, I mean, we're not seeing a lot else from anyone else. To be honest, that's got to be less than 10 wins.
that's
The
grim.
Grim.
But I'm afraid I can't really say much more. They would. Who would those wins be?
Well, I guess we're gonna have to look at some of these other teams that we're about to run into. So
Yeah.
number two, I've said Kemba's probably their best player, and Jason Tatum would then become their best player. Now, this was
Ah.
pretty on the fence for me if I picked Kemba or Tatum as their best player, but I'll tell you why I picked Kemba. I think Kemba he closed out the All Star game for Giannis's team. He's more reliable, I think, and I think he's just more mature. I think that's why you'd put him as a better player.
I think at the moment, but I really think that Jason Tatum has really stepped it up a notch this season. And I think that next season, I think we'll see Jason Tatum just go from strength to strength. And I think I think he could well be like the centerpiece for that team. The Celtics are interesting. They've kind of
Mm.
been inconsistent. They've been way more consistent this year, which I'm really pleased about. And I think that if Kemba was to leave, Jason Tatum, I think he would really step up to the plate.
Yeah, and they're definitely not bad. Like I think having Gordon Hayward still, Marcus Smart, they
Yeah.
have Jalen Brown
Yeah, he's good.
and Tatum. Like that's actually a good setup. All right, so next one is the Brooklyn Nets. Now I've gone from this season, which would mean that they would lose Kyrie, and Spencer Dinwiddie then becomes their best player, right?
Okay.
Point guard, got a good 3-point game on him, pretty decent. Now for them, I don't think this isn't that much of a problem because Kyrie was injured for a lot of the year,
Yeah.
and they actually are still in the playoff race. So for them, and just as we see how bad some of these teams get, it's not the end of the
It's
world.
not. I couldn't agree more, mate. I think yeah, the fact that Kyrie only played, a dozen games. I mean, I don't know exactly how many he played, but he seemed to be in and out for this whole season, and
Mm,
they still managed to put together a couple of upsets. Um,
mm,
and they had some consistent players come through. I mean, Joe Harris, obviously, great shooter.
mm.
And I don't even mind DeAndre Jordan. I don't mind him. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. All right. Now this next one is an absolute devastation.
I
Now they're all. I mean, it's a devastation in some ways. I guess to some degree, it's not as bad just because they had really nowhere to go. But the Hornets, now they'd lose Devonte Graham, who had a great season this year, which puts their best
mm,
player as probably Terry Rozier, which you never want to say those words that Terry Rozier is
scary
your best
Terry.
player. Um,
I
I would say
d-
just to quickly go through this one, I that team, I mean, was already unwatchable, and I think becomes even more so.
I actually have a soft spot in my heart for Scary Terry. I feel like he was a really good replacement point guard when he was playing in the Celtics.
Yeah.
Or as a replacement point guard, but like a off the bench point guard.
Mm.
I feel like in some of the playoff series, maybe it might have been even against the Bucks, he really showed up and he had a couple of clutch plays, and so I mean, sure, he's not the best point guard out there, but yeah, I think that he's all right. But yeah, look, I mean,
You just look at some of those names,
it's
like Cody Zeller.
I don't even know who that is. Yeah, I like scraping the bottom of the non-existent barrel at this stage for the Charlotte Hornets. I mean, I don't even know what they. Mate. Again, the less said, the better. I mean, you can't. It's not even a polished turd. It's just a turd at this stage.
Now, I think just to carry on there's 3 teams that their city starts with C, and I think none of them are spared at all by this destruction of their best player. So Chicago, I feel like has an unfortunate one. So they've got Zach LaVine, not too bad. He's gone, which means their next best player is either Lauri Markkanen or Kobe White.
I actually, I've really enjoyed watching Kobe White this season. He
Okay.
has played refreshingly good. I think he's kind of almost etching himself into that kind of sphere of like deep 3 point range that we see people like Trey Young and like Steph, that kind of that group, you know. And he's really quick, and I like his style. He's got a mad throw, which doesn't have anything to do with his basketball, but
Yeah.
I kind of like his steez. So I think that
Mhm.
obviously they would really suffer not having someone as athletically dominant as Zach Levine. I think that Kobe White he'd get way more minutes, and I think that he would really shine a lot more.
Now, the only thing that is bad for Kobe White, I think he's still a bit undercooked because so he's got an okay 3-point percentage. Like we both know him because we watched those Bulls highlights where he torched the Bucks and it
He
was very
did.
unfortunate. But okay, so his 3-point percentage is 35%.
Okay, yeah,
I've
I'm
just looked
looking
this
up
up.
some details now
But
too.
his
Yeah.
his field goal percentage is 39%. Now
Oh.
I think that's on pace to be pretty much one of the worst in the league. Now don't quote me on that,
Mm.
but I think most people are sitting around 50% as a general field goal, and he's not near that. So that is unfortunate. But I guess it's also probably most of his shots are 3-pointers. So I guess it, at the end of the day makes sense.
It is tough, but what I would say is if you just I'm just looking at his game logs here for his points, and we are going deep now in Kobe White, which doesn't really matter, but I'm looking at his scoring history, and if you look at
Hmm.
basically from the end of February of this year, he's put up some
Hmm.
really consistent numbers and had some really good
Hmm.
minutes as well. He's basically played 30 plus minutes, and I'd say his average points in those games is sitting at about 25 ish.
Okay.
And so that's really promising. If you just, and I'm just scrolling down to start of the season, October last year, there's a lot of single digits here. Oh, you got 25 points, great. But then, a lot of single digits, not a lot, like
Hmm.
similar, a little bit less minutes, but similar ish minutes. He's looking really inconsistent. He had a couple of really bad patches here where he didn't get, two, three, anything there. So I think that there's some real potential with this young man, and yeah, I think the future will be bright for him if he works hard.
Wow.
Yeah,
Strong words from Thom Nixon. Hopefully Kobe White's on listening,
mate.
mate. He's got a fan in you.
I'd buy your jersey, mate. I'd bloody get one. Why not?
I'd say this probably has to be the most time talked about Kobe White of any NBA podcast this year,
I'm gonna
I'd say.
DM him on Instagram after this and say, "Hey, bro, you should check out my dude's podcast." I just said something and I thought to you.
So let's go into the next team, which is another contender for just to get absolutely rolled by this. So in this situation where their best player vanishes, it's Kevin Love. He's gone. So now they're looking at their best player is Andre Drummond. Now,
Oh,
Andre
okay.
Drummond, but now Andre Drummond, not too bad, but you can't win with him. He's not a winner. He's a good stat guy, not a
I
winner.
just
Um,
I'm just going to jump in real quick here. Sorry to interrupt.
yeah.
Just going back to your first question about how low did you go trying to get your NBA fix? I saw a highlight reel of Andre Drummond throwing the ball from like half court. I don't know if you've seen this highlight. He's behind half court. It's the end of a quarter, and he just tosses it up and he nails it, and it's a brilliant
Uh-huh.
shot, and I loved it. So
So sitting at a probably 100% 3-point percentage with that half court toss on the season. So just some of the other names they got going down there, Cleveland Cavaliers, like Matthew Dellavedova.
don't you
Um,
talk bad about Matthew Dellavedova? Don't you dare. That's un-Australian.
I don't have anything too bad to say about Delhi other than his peak was 5 years ago, and he's still up the Cavs for some reason. Colin Sexton, Cedi Osman again fine, and Drummond fine. Um, But again, they are already the worst team, and I feel like this Kevin Love hit is probably too much.
Yeah, it's tough. I actually don't even know why. Andre Drummond got traded to the Cavs, didn't he?
Yeah, from the Pistons.
It's unfortunate. Yeah, they would really struggle. I don't even know who Seti Osman is.
I love how you've already said twice you don't know who a starting player
I
is, and I
just
think that's gonna show the level of research we've put into
yeah.
this, podcast.
Well, yeah. Look, look, they'd rebound well.
Yeah.
Delhi defends well. They'd be a great defensive team, kind of. Not really. They'd be an all right defensive team on a good day. Offensively, yeah, not a lot to poke a stick at. So I think,
Yeah.
again, less said the better. Let's move on because the Cavaliers, it's been rough since LeBron
It's
left.
grim.
Yeah.
It's good. We don't need to tell you guys.
Yeah.
Your team stinks.
We're not singing you a new song here. Oh, jeez.
You're not staring at yourself and hoping to God you get the wooden spoon so you can apply for that number one draft pick.
Well,
Yeah,
they're in business too. They are currently last on the ladder with 19 wins and 46 losses. So I mean, that's only beaten or worsened by the Warriors, but we'll get to that in a
yeah.
second.
So we've got the next team is the Dallas Mavericks. Now here, this is the first team that I think, or it's one of the first teams that, other than the Celtics, that I think actually has a fighter's chance of being okay still.
Okay.
So you got Kristaps Porzingis, who has been getting better as the season's gone on.
Yep.
You got Tim Hardaway Jr., who can get you 20.
Hmm.
Um,
I
and then
like
I think
him.
you've got an assortment of other people that can kind of fit together.
Absolutely. You've got Seth Curry there.
Oh,
I've always been a huge fan of Seth Curry. I think that
yeah.
yeah, I really I like watching him. Yeah, I think that he's a great basketball player. But I feel like Dallas. Yeah, look, they would struggle without Luca. He is
Mm,
something special, and everyone knows that. Um,
mhm,
but they're a young team. They're just, they're starting to get a bit of something now. Like
mhm,
they beat the Lakers at least once, maybe twice. So
mm,
I've really enjoyed watching the Mavericks as well this season,
yeah.
and not just because of Luca. They're an entertaining team because you know, they play a good assist game. They do defend hard, and they're creative with their offense, and I really appreciate and respect that.
Yeah. All right. So next team, Denver Nuggets. Now, obviously, we've lost Jokic here. For them, their best player becomes Jamal Murray. I would say.
He's
The
been hot
thing
this season. Sorry, go on.
He's been good. No, no. The thing about this team, they are a bit of a. They're already kind of like a sneaky, kind of deep team, like
Mm,
where you don't know who's going to beat you each night. So I don't think this is too bad for them,
yeah.
even though Jokic is sick.
Jokic is amazing, but yeah, these guys are a really deep team, and everyone forgets that they are, and everyone forgets that they're currently third on the Western Conference ladder. So I
Yeah.
think that they'd be hurt by the loss of Jokic, but um, I don't think it would just decimate their team, so to speak.
All right. Moving to the Detroit Pistons, mate. Now they're going to lose Blake Griffin, who is already kind of banged up. And that leaves them with their best player, probably is Derek Rose, who has had a sneaky good season.
He has. I've enjoyed D Rose this season. I think he's played really well. I mean, looking at I'm just going to name a couple of the other players, basically affectionately called the Bucks leftovers from 3 years ago. Tony Snell, Thon Maker. I'm looking at you. Far out. What a joke. This team is good for one thing, and that's making D Rose look okay. So that's what I've got to say about the Pistons.
The other thing here is, so we're looking at some lineups that were basically like the last starting five the team offered, and I'm seeing a name here. I don't know if you're seeing it here. It's the last name here, Sviatoslav Mihalik. Now, not only have I never heard that name, I couldn't pick that man out of a lineup, even if everyone else in the lineup was 6 foot and he was 6'11". I don't know if he's 5'10". I don't know if he's 7'3",
I
but
I literally have nothing to say. I mean, I can't pronounce it, nor can I make a comment on it, and we're short on time. So let's move right along.
this one here is a bit of a strange one because we've already seen a season without it, but we've got Steph Curry would have to go, I would say. Which puts our best player, now I'm saying Clay Thompson only because I think he would technically be available at this point.
Would he?
Yeah, they were saying this was like they were saying they'll rest him the season, but I think if he's not the best player, then Andrew Wiggins is the player that would be their best player. And we've seen that with the Timberwolves for a little bit before Towns got really good, and it's not a place you want to be.
Yeah, look, I mean, Golden State Warriors have done the Hoopathaticals for us, basically.
Yeah, that's
When
true.
you lobotomize your team and all you get left with is like literally no namers.
Yeah,
They've been hard to watch this season. I mean, even with Steph played what, maybe 5 or 6 games this season, maybe even
yeah,
less. He didn't play much,
yeah,
and even with him putting up some somewhat okay numbers, they still sucked, and they
yeah,
still are last both in the Western Conference and overall with a
yeah.
percentage here of 0.231.
Tough.
Yikes.
Just shout out to a name I've never heard before. Juan Toscano Anderson. Don't know who you are, but you started for the Golden State Warriors in their last game. That's the kind of
Juan.
level of depth they're dealing with.
Oh, mate, I tell you what, they're not number one anymore. So, jeez.
Oh boy, not good. All right, so moving on to the next team alphabetically, which is the Houston Rockets. So they lose
Mm,
James Harden. Now, this leaves us in a kind of interesting situation because you now have, as their best player, obviously Russell Westbrook. That, to me, is not too bad because their team is kind of geared towards Russell Westbrook a little bit now.
Yeah, well, I mean, he already kind of plays this for not half the game, but for sections of the game anyway, when they bench Harden and they sort of just
Yeah.
play around Westbrook anyway. This team is perhaps the best team at we have one good player. How can we make them the best player? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah,
so
definitely.
I have full confidence that if Harden were to bugger off to some other team, which I can't see him doing as a side note,
Yeah.
um, they would have no problems in just shifting that gear to make Westbrook.
Mm.
I mean, is it possible to pad his numbers out even more? I'm not sure, but I'm sure that they would make it. They would have a good crack at it.
So that team, I think, as actually when you've got 2 stars, you can see how valuable it is in this challenge, right? Like, that's when this is when it starts to really become clear, like, which teams are really reliant on their best player, and I feel like Houston, it not too bad. So moving to the Pacers, so I would say they lose now, I there was a sort of I had to decide who they would lose. I always said Sabonis because he was the all-star for that team this year, which means that
Right.
they've still got Brogdon and Oladipo,
Hmm.
which isn't too bad.
I think the Pacers again. I put them in a similar sort of potential, like they have similar potential to what the Mavericks do, which is
Mm,
they've been playing really well. They're still working on their consistency, but they're entertaining and they're young, and I love it. I have really enjoyed this team. I'm pretty devastated that Brogdon's playing so well on there, but good on him. Um, yeah, I think they'd be fine. Honestly, Oladipo when he's only been back a couple of games, month or so,
mm.
but better than ever. And yeah, Brogdon's fire.
So that team, pretty good. And they actually can slub, like, Miles Teller and, sort of around, like, doing the Domantas Sabonis kinda job, and I think that's
Yeah,
actually not too bad.
yeah, agreed.
Alright, so our next team, we've got the Clippers. Now, obviously, we lose Kawhi, but they still have another kinda all-star type player as Paul George.
They do.
That's not bad.
It's not bad at all. And I mean, I'm looking at some other names here. Pat Beverly, great team.
Mhm.
Marcus Morris, good on
Yeah.
him. Yeah, I think that they. I think they'd still be contenders. I mean, we all know what George can do, and without
Mm.
Kawhi, it would suck. But they'd still be a competitive team.
Yeah, that's pretty good. They're in a pretty good position. And moving on to the other LA team, if we're gonna lose LeBron, who we have to lose this year because he was in the MVP race, we that leaves our best player as Anthony Davis, which you'd be
Yeah.
stoked with. Given some of these other teams, that's a absolute godsend.
If he's your second, then
Yeah.
you're doing something right. So I think that they would be, it'd still be super competitive. They would still be
Mhm.
amazing. They have so many like just solid foundational players on that team.
Not too bad at all. Memphis Grizzlies. Now this is kind of an unfortunate one because this year the prediction was that they were going to do really badly. They got Ja
Mm,
Morant and he absolutely lit it up this season.
I've loved
He'd be
Ja.
the one to go. Now that leaves our best player as either Jaren Jackson Jr. or Jonas Valanciunas. Now
Oof.
Jaren Jackson, I think, is probably the one to go. He's a little bit undercooked at the moment, but not too bad. But some of these other names, like Kyle Anderson, I mean, what? Who even are you?
Yeah, D'Anthony Melton. I've look. I mean, I'm gonna skip the question almost and say I've thoroughly loved watching Ja Morant light it up this season. He is a very
Mhm.
entertaining and cocky player, and I'm into it. Heaven forbid if Valanciunas is your best player. He's all right, I guess. Far out. The lesson for the Grizzlies here should be hang on to Ja Morant and make him like a player that wants to stay in your franchise. Because if you don't, someone else is going to pay him really good money to play for their team, and he's going to win games for them. You know?
All right, so going into the Miami Heat, now we're going to
Oh wow.
lose old Jimmy buckets, but they still have Bam. Now this is another thing I was thinking. It's like, is Bam isn't better because who would you trust with the ball with 3 seconds left, and I guess Jimmy's still kind of like the main dog, but Bam is good.
Yeah, I mean, you have to remember there's Dragic on that team as well.
Hmm.
He's got some experience, and again, I've loved the Heat this season. I feel like no one really gave them much credence or really paid them attention, and then they just started putting up win after win after
Yeah,
win. And so, yeah, I don't even think that Jimmy's reached his full potential on this team yet. If he was to go though, they'd be hurting, but there's some really good players on that team. Um, who's the rookie? I've thoroughly enjoyed watching
Mm.
Kendrick Nunn this season. He has been, yeah, and even Kelly Olynyk. Shout out to Ryan.
Yeah, definitely shout out to Ryan. Our next team is, of course, the Milwaukee Bucks. We know, obviously it's Giannis that's gone, which puts Middleton as the main player. Um, that is a blow.
It's tough. It really is. We've seen the Bucks without Giannis. We've seen them
Mhm,
be okay without Giannis, but we haven't
mhm.
seen them be great without Giannis. I love the Bucks though, so I'm going to be
Yeah.
biased, and I'm going to say I actually think that there's some underrated players on this team. Of course, I'm going to say this, but Dante DiVincenzo this season, I think he's averaging
Oh,
about 9.4 points a game. He has really improved since coming back from that injury.
mm,
And even the likes of Pat Connaughton. I love Kyle Korver on this squad as well. He needs to get more ball. And George
mm,
Hill, wow. He's really making the Bledsoe look trash. And that's just because he's so good. So, yeah, look, without Giannis, it would be a struggle. I actually still think that they'd comfortably make it to the playoffs. And I think
me
that
too.
they would still be competitive because they still have that same heart that captured your attention back in the day. But would they be like genuine contenders for the ring? Oh, I'll let you answer
I would say only if, like, 9 people got injured, I would say they could be a
that.
front runner.
Chris Middleton is underrated though. He's terribly underrated, and he has played very well
Mm.
this season, averaging like 21 points.
Well, I was, absolutely starved for NBA content. I watched who's the best shooter at every different part on the floor, and he is, right baseline, best shooter in the
Yeah,
NBA. So there you go. With that
he's got
little, we love that little mid fade that he puts out.
oh,
Unstoppable.
he's got like Kevin Durant levels of mid range, just like accuracy and just danger. You know what I mean? Like just his ability.
That's probably insulting to Durant, but
It's I actually think that it was criminal that last season he didn't lean on that mid range as much as he could
oh,
have.
yeah.
It's great to see it back, and it's great to see him actually put up some real good numbers. I think he had his first 50-point game a month or two ago against maybe the
Mhm.
Wizards, was it?
Our next team, the Timberwolves. Now, this is again not too much of a loss. They're going to lose Carl Anthony Towns, but they did pick up D'Angelo Russell pretty recently. And what we saw from last year is that D'Angelo Russell can lead a team of okay players to the eighth seed in a playoff thing. However,
But
looking at some of these other names, I don't want to see. I don't want the ball ever going to three. I don't want the ball going to any other person than D'Angelo Russell. Juan Hernan Gomez, don't get him the ball. Naz Reid, let's not give him the ball. I mean, there is just a
Malik
list of people.
Beasley.
If you're the coach, you're saying you guys set screens and get out of the way because we do not need you.
Absolutely, and I think you hit the nail on the head. D'Lo has a great tenacity to be able to take a pretty crap team and slither them into the top eight by the by the skin of their collectively
Mm.
awful noses. So
Our next team is the Pelicans. Now, this one I actually don't even mind
uh,
for these guys. So I've put that their best player is Brandon Ingram, just because he was the All Star this year for them. But then that means their best player is now Zion, which means their starting lineup could look like this: Lonzo, Drew Holiday, JJ Redick, Zion, and Derek Favors. That is still a decent starting lineup.
you heard it here first. The Pelicans are a team to watch next season. So, and that's not even just with Zion. I feel like Lonzo Ball has played his best basketball in this team as far as his assists, his game knowledge. Yeah, Drew Holiday, even Derek Favors there. They're 10th on the ladder, which isn't great, but yeah, I think that they could still be very competitive even without Brandon Ingram.
Totally. That's still a good lineup to me. Now this
Yeah.
next team, I think we can basically say one word. It's the New York Knicks. They're gonna lose, and I looked up who their best player is, Julius Randle. That team is just gonna stink. I don't think we need to. There's not a lot to say there. It's just that's garbage.
Well, look, what I can say is, zero times zero is still zero. Credit to the Knicks. As much as they do get a lot of crap, they are 12th on the Eastern Conference ladder. And so, as much as it feels like they should be last, there
Mhm.
is three teams below them, and
Mm.
one of those teams has Trey Young in it.
That is a fair point. That is a fair
Yeah,
point.
I'm definitely not the first one to jump to defending the New York Knicks. And I could go on all night for the rest of the 6.5 hours we've got here, talking about how trash they are. But they are 12th, and that's not
Mhm.
15th.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That is true. That is true. Okay, our next team, I think this team is quite hurt by this just because of what he brings to the table. The next team is Oklahoma City. Now they're going to lose Chris Paul. Now they can't. Now the thing is, they're not a bad team without Chris Paul, but by God, did he make them like? There's without him, they're definitely not in the playoffs.
He has been incredible this season.
Yeah.
Everyone wrote them off after Westbrook left, and he has just gone. And he got almost like banished to them. Sent
Mm,
there just to fade away, and they've snuck their way into a fifth position on the leaderboards. I've loved
mm.
Gilgis Alexander this season.
Oh,
He's
he's
been
good. He's
he's been
good.
fantastic. He's been so good, and people are only just starting to give him credit for it.
Speaking of people that shoot the best at different places on the floor, right in front at the top of the 3-point line, Danilo Gallinari, highest 3-point percentage.
Oh,
Actually, an asset, and he's a big guy. So that's
I'm
a
I'm
little
actually just
sneaky fact.
I'm actually just scrolling through his numbers now over the last few games. He's put up some really consistent numbers here.
It is great.
He's got a 3-point percentage of 40%.
Yeah.
His field goal percentage is 43, so that's not fantastic. But
The next team is the Orlando Magic. Now, this team, I must say, constantly surprised me that they're any good at all. Like, the fact that they keep making it into playoffs is shocking to me, but then I feel like
yeah,
at the East, it's a race to see, like, who can't make it, Like, there's 6 people and then there's spots open. Now, they're gonna lose Nikola Vucevic, which means their best player is probably Aaron Gordon. I haven't seen a lot of Magic. I don't wanna comment because I just feel like it just feels like the one of the least relevant teams. Like, at least the Knicks are relevant because they're so bad. The
yeah,
Magic, it's like, what are you?
probably the most brandless team out there, and this is coming from a team that is branded by Disney. I care so little about this team. They're so boring. Like they literally offer nothing in the way of entertainment. I don't know if I can be more clear. Like, and this is coming from someone like Aaron got like dunk contest. Vucevic is the most boring best player on a team. That's it. That's it, man.
Honestly, you heard it here first. Vucevic, most boring player, the most
Yet,
boring best player.
having said that, I can still see them getting eighth in the Eastern
Mm,
Conference and taking a team to 5 games. I don't know. Like I can
mm.
see it happening. So
All right, going to the 76ers. We've got now. Obviously, we've got two people to pick from here: Simmons and Embiid. But I think at their peak, if we would go peak versus peak, I think it's Embiid is the
really,
better. I think so. Tell you why. He's always if he wasn't injured as much, he's always in the running for defensive player. He's got like a just devastating post game. Yeah, that's my thoughts. What's your thoughts?
I really don't like Joel Embiid. I honestly,
Okay.
he's such a wuss, and he doesn't play hard and he doesn't work hard. Really do love Ben Simmons. I would disagree with you on this, and I'd say that Ben Simmons is the best player on the 76ers at the moment.
Mm.
Again, the 76ers, I know we're trying to keep it short, but I can't. Um, I see them as the same. They're very similar to the Celtics. So much
It's been a month, and you
potential.
just it's all this bottled up information. Yeah.
Absolutely. They're very similar to the Celtics. They've had so much potential and they've played well and so many like decent names in there, and yet they've been consistently inconsistent. And they should be like, what are they? Sixth on the Eastern Conference. The Heat and the Pacers are above them.
Mm.
That shouldn't be the case for them. They should be like a top 3 or 4. They should be like with the names that are there
Yeah.
and all this kind of stuff. But like, I mean, but yeah, I think that the 76ers, it'd be similar
Mm.
with our synopsis of the Celtics. I think that it would hurt them to lose Simmons or Embiid, but I think that they'd recover from it and I think they'd find someone else.
Yeah, I think because they still have someone to go to, which I think is valuable. Some of these other teams, I'm not sure, but they definitely still have an option, which is good for them.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Going to the Suns. Now, obviously, we're going to lose Devin Booker here.
Yeah.
Now the thing is, they had a surprisingly good season. People thought they were going to be like hot garbage down
I
there with the
didn't.
Warriors.
Nah, I called it
Um,
early. I think, no, no, no. I feel passionately about the Suns.
okay, I thought Baines had a great season.
Yep.
He was just an absolute sniper, big screen set. I love to see. DeAndre Ayton had a good season. I like Saric. I actually don't mind their team, But without Devin Booker, what do we got? Like Ricky Rubio starting there. So your best player is probably Aiton or Rubio. That's not a great best player, but their actual depth is not as bad as you'd think.
No, I think Rubio's underrated. I think he's fantastic. He was great in Utah, and I think he's been great. Honestly, mate, I actually thought the Suns were going to do better this year. They're sitting at 13th on the ladder. I thought they were going to do a lot better. I saw like the trades, and I thought that they would be a team that would actually be a lot more competitive. But I still have hope for them for next season. I really think that the Suns are going to be a top 8 next season. You heard it
You heard
here.
it here first.
Commit it to tape. Commit it to vinyl. I don't care. I think they're going to be top 8 next season. Aaron Baines, like leaving the Celtics was the best thing for him. He's just got flexibility to put up that 3-point shot, which has always been there, mate. People just haven't let him shoot it. Really,
Wow, there you go.
yeah,
Thom Nixon, top
yeah,
8 Suns next year.
yeah.
Our next team is the Portland Trailblazers. Now, obviously, we're losing Lillard here, which means your best player is CJ McCollum. Now, they did have a dry run of this year, and they were in a situation where people said they should consider tanking. So I do like CJ McCollum. I think weirdly Carmelo was not bad for them to pick up, but without Lillard, you lose the engine in the car, you know?
If I could use one word to describe the Portland Trailblazers, disappointing.
Yeah.
I want them to be good.
Mm.
Last year, I wanted them to be good so bad, and they just weren't. Like Lillard's great. I mean, he's again in that same club of like just ridiculous deep 3-point shooters. He's
Mm,
almost the OG next to Curry with that 3-point
mm.
range. But he's just I don't know. I really love CJ McCollum. I'm in full agreement with you there. I think he's fantastic. I loved Seth Curry on that team. But I'm happy he left because it kind of wasn't going anywhere, and I think he knew it.
Second Seth Curry shout out of the pod.
Absolutely, mate. I
Seth
think
Curry and Rozier need to get in contact with
They
you, mate.
they they do. I think that Hassan Whiteside has been really good for that team.
Mhm.
Defensively, he's put up some pretty serious blocks. Yeah, Melo is just like the quintessential. He's the really the reason I just don't like the Blazers. He's just crap. I just don't like him. I don't like his face. I don't like how he plays. I don't like how much he big ups himself. I don't like how he acted on the Knicks. I still don't like him. I think he should have retired. And I feel like he's just on the Trailblazers because no one else will give him minutes. So, like, I don't like watching that team because he's on it. Basically, I just want to see Lillard highlights. That's all I want to see.
So I'm liking in your power rankings, Carmelo Anthony 0, Kobe White 10. That's where we're at.
I really love Kobe White, man. Hit me up,
All
dude.
right.
I'll write reviews for you, bro.
Our next team is the Sacramento Kings. Now, we're going to lose De'Aaron Fox here, who I like a lot. He's a bit of a jar type.
I actually thought you would have said that Buddy Hield would have been the best player on that team.
I don't know, man. I think
Yeah.
Buddy Hield, I think, probably has had a better year this year. So maybe you do keep him and then De'Aaron Fox is your best player. But I mean, like, just for my money, I personally love De'Aaron Fox. He's got nice swag. He's got a good game. He's so quick. He can hit a
Yep.
three. He's got the headband going sometimes, which I like. Unconventional style, like the tie up one where you tie it up at the back.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, and you got to respect that.
Mm.
I really love, yeah, I love him. I think Buddy Hield's great as well. I'm a big
Mm.
fan of Buddy Hield. I want to keep he's the kind of player where it's like I just want to keep watching.
They have some nice pieces, like Bogdan Bogdanovic is like a absolute sniper. Harrison Barnes is good, Hield's good. They got that Marvin Bagley guy. Like, they're actually not a bad lineup. I think they must have good coaching or something.
Yeah, I'm not sure what it is, but yeah, I agree. I like some of the names on there, and I think that they've got potential to even sneak into the top 8 if they play really well. And the difference between them and the Grizzlies at 8th is all of 4 wins. So I think that they could be in there. They could be contenders over the next couple of years if they play their cards right.
Our next team is the San Antonio Spurs.
Just
Now,
just before we go to the San Antonio
sorry,
Spurs, I'll
man.
just make a quick note here about the Trailblazers. I hate to bash them even more, but they are currently ninth. They are ninth underneath the Grizzlies, and my goodness, I just this really just proves my point. Like they are under the Grizzlies, and you heard our comments before. We don't hate the Grizzlies, but they've got some problems there. And the Trailblazers, for all of the people are talking about them, they're ninth, and they were like this last season. They only just got into the playoffs, so
You
I'm
made,
sick of
I
them.
thought-
I'm sick of them.
you actually made water come out of my nose just because I was honestly not expecting an unsolicited another Trailblazers rant, but I'll keep my ears open for an assault on Carmelo Anthony while we're talking about the Wizards.
I like
Well,
these.
I was not expecting that at all. Oh wow.
Oh, sorry.
So the next team is the San Antonio Spurs. Now I've put their best player is got to be LaMarcus Aldridge. Now we've got two pretty similar players in DeMar DeRozan and LaMarcus Aldridge, mid-range monsters, and
Yeah.
but LaMarcus Aldridge, I think in January or February had the best 3-point percentage in the NBA,
Wow.
and I think that's got to set the difference. He was and he did it to the Bucks as well. He torched us. There was one game where they just left him out on the three, and he was just hitting everything. So I think that means your best player is DeMar DeRozan. Not ideal, um, but not awful.
Look, with the Spurs, again, I want them to be good. I love Patty Mills, and that's why I want them to be
Mm.
good. He plays such a good game on that team. Yeah, no LaMarcus Aldridge. Oh, but yeah, the Spurs, what are they, 12th?
There's just such a nothing season this year. Like
They are.
honestly,
They have been. They've been kind of okay the last few seasons. They've been
Mm.
more up there in the top eight. But yeah, this season they've been a little faceless, nameless. I mean, they've
Yeah,
been a little akin to like the Magic, really.
haven't helped them if they're akin to even the Trailblazers. Let's
Uh,
not trigger you again,
don't
mate.
don't roll me up over that again, mate. Or I mean, that will be solicited. So
The Toronto Raptors, the next one. Now, this team is
yeah,
deep, and the Bucks found that out last year, which is
didn't
unfortunate.
didn't they?
Um, so I've said now this is debatable, and I want to get your take on this. I said that they are going to lose Siakam, and Kyle Lowry now becomes their best player. Do you agree that's Siakam's their best player?
By a fraction. Kyle Lowry has been great there, and
He's
everyone
been
thought
good.
he was going to be crap, and he's been fantastic. He's put up some
Mm,
seriously deep threes, and he's been a fantastic kind of leader of that team. The Raptors have sort of kind of like Golden State Warriors. They've already done this. They
mm,
had Kawhi come and go, and they're still, everyone thought they were going to be rubbish, and they're second.
yeah.
And your comment was bang on. They're a seriously deep team. I remember watching the series with the Bucks last year and thinking, what's a Van Fleet? And my goodness, did I know what a Van Fleet was by the end of that series? He just destroyed us. So
Mm,
I think the Raptors would be fine.
yeah,
Unfortunately for us, because well, luckily the season's off. Not luckily, but they're a competitive team, man, and everyone hates them, but they're
yeah.
competitive.
And they got good, like just people like Gasol. You can throw out there,
Yeah,
Barker. You're
yeah.
saying, Lowry.
Ibaka's been great.
Yeah, Van Vliet. Yeah, they're just deep. All right, mate. The Utah Jazz. Now, I feel like this one does the most distortion to how this team would play the game. So we lose Donovan Mitchell,
Hmm.
and that means your best player is Rudy Gobert. I think that changes how this team plays basketball a fair bit.
It does. I've actually really enjoyed the Utah Jazz this season. I've really enjoyed
Mm,
watching them. Again, I put them in a similar league to the Nuggets. People forget they're good. They're fourth. You are right, though. This does really throw a spanner in the works for them because Donovan Mitchell is such a explosive element to their team, and obviously Rudy Gobert is just like he's a defensive kind of player.
yeah,
I
yeah,
don't know what else to say. I don't know how they're making points.
yeah,
But I love Joe Ingles on that
yeah. Same.
team. I mean, I'm really showing my national colours here, but he gets disrespected on the 3-point line routinely, and a day of reckoning is coming for the Utah Jazz. Yeah, I think that their style of game would play, but I still think they'd be top eight, and I still think they'd be upset worthy. The Jazz beat us, like
Mm,
Milwaukee, somewhat comfortably, and it was yeah, that's not
mm.
something to sneeze at.
That isn't. And our final team to round it out is the Washington Wizards. Now, this is a tough one. So they're going to lose Bradley Beal. If you start looking at the rest of that roster, I've looked at who would be the next best player. Now, they've got John Wall injured at the moment, but again, John Wall, I mean, like, who knows? Is an ACL, so he's going to come back. He's going to be a different player. So, of their current roster, their next best player is either Rui Hachimura or Davis Bertans.
What? What are your thoughts, mate?
I think, I like Davis Bertans. He's a classic Euro, 3 points, weird facial hair, too white to play, but somehow is still a serviceable member. And Rui Hachimura, just like a sort of athletic point guard. But it's a team that, I mean, they did well to be outside of the bottom three in the East, and this does not help them at all.
I have absolutely no idea how they are ninth. I mean, the teams that they're beating are a trash heap, but they're
Yeah.
ninth nonetheless. Take Bradley Beal. Bradley Beal actually has been criminally underrated this season.
He's been good.
I don't. What's to watch on? I'll sum it up. What's to watch on the Wizards without Bradley Beal? Case in point.
Empty arenas, I reckon. So that's all the teams that we can see. Some teams have been depleted. Some teams have remained actually pretty steady, and I think it really shows teams that have depth. I think that now what the best thing to do is to look at the teams that have been the biggest gap. Okay,
Mm.
so teams that are really going to get hit hard by this. Now, I've made a short list, and I just want to hear your thoughts if you agree with the short list. If there's anything else that jumps out at you, my number one for teams that have been destroyed by this is the Hawks. The only reason that it's not hurtful is they're second last in the East, but they've lost to their best player is their best player by a long shot.
You said it for me.
Another team I would say is Dallas with Luca. I don't know if they're in the top 8 without Luca. So
Ooh.
that just for the sheer distance between Luca and KP, which I didn't think would be as big as it is, but watching them together, it's like Luca's just he's top 3 in MVP.
Yeah, I still think they'd actually be competitive. But I think it would take like a year
Mm.
for them to collect themselves.
I've said Memphis. I just looking at if you're staring down the barrel of Jonas Valanciunas being the last person called up in the starting lineup, you don't want to watch those games.
I'm shaking my head. That's all I
Yeah.
have to say.
I did think Milwaukee loses a lot of spots. They're definitely not number one in the East. They probably drop down to a 4 or 5, I'd say. I would say another
Yeah.
big one. Yeah, I mean, another big one I'd have to say is OKC. Chris Paul has just unified that team and brought them to a good spot. Portland, we saw them. We've already seen this season, and they are hot garbage. I hate to bring them up again. I just hate to bring them up again.
I hate to extend this already overtime podcast, but wow.
And then finally, the Wizards. I would say that's a team that how they're ninth without Bradley Beal is
Uh,
literally mathematically impossible. I think. So, out of those ones, who do you think has the worst? Who's the worst affected? Do you reckon?
if by worst affected you mean like they go from being good to being the worst, like the biggest gap, because I think that like the Hawks would go from really bad to really really bad, so that doesn't really mean much. Um, I actually think the biggest drop would be for a team like Milwaukee, actually, because they are first and so far out on the ladder there. I think it would really hurt them. I think that they would, honestly, I think they'd be like, yeah, 5, 6, 7th without Giannis, and like they would just tank.
Yeah, I think my vote's gonna have to go with the Blazers just because we saw it this season and it was not pretty. And when Lillard
Yeah,
came back, you could see how much that brought the team. He just brought a fire.
I'm gonna try and hold myself back from making any comments about Portland.
Okay, the next one is the shortest gap. So, who was the least affected by this? Now, I've put a couple of a short list. So, the 76ers I put, and potentially even they've gone the other way, I would say, but we'll come to that in a bit. The Spurs, the Kings, just because they're bad deep. Everyone's kind of the same skill level, but they're deep in that level, you know?
I'd have to agree with you on that, actually.
Orlando, I mean, aside from losing the most boring superstar of all time, I think they're pretty much the same. I mean, you're never hearing stuff like, wow, if they lost Vucevic, I don't know what this team would do. It's like,
I actually see you've got the Celtics here, and I might even go for them just based off the fact that they lost a couple of players in the trades at the end of last season,
oh, yeah.
and they've actually gotten more competitive. So
Mm.
I think that they would be able to take that brunt again.
Yeah, and so just some of the other ones I was thinking, Knicks, just because it's already an all sorts roster, I mean, it doesn't really matter. Lakers, I thought you could redesign that offense so that you get Anthony Davis
Yeah.
as your primary guy the whole time, and I think you could still work that. The Clippers, I think Paul George could. We've seen him actually lead a team in Indiana to be a half decent team, just kind of by himself. So I think he can lead this team. And then finally, the Pacers. You're losing Sabonis, but you can use Brogdon, and I think they can kind of do stuff. But you think the Celtics is the answer there?
I do. Yeah, I really
Yeah.
do.
I'm gonna have to go the 76ers, and I think it's because they're a bit confused right now. Like, you're right, their roster says they should be, top 3, and they're currently 6th. I think that's because they don't know what their identity is. If you lose one of their best players, I think they get that identity straight away.
Yeah, I think that's actually that's soberly said. I would have to agree
Okay.
with you on that. Yeah.
Now, did any teams improve? Now, I've put 3 here. Nets, I've put because they lose Kyrie, and I think that actually brings the team together. The 76ers, as we just mentioned, you lose one play, but you get an identity. And the Spurs, I think they're just kind of their 2 best players are mid-range players, which you just don't want in 2020. So you lose
Yeah.
one. Now you got one guy who can hit a mid-range, and then you've got another, and then the rest of the team can sort of be a 3-point team, you know?
I think the Nets. I think that would kind of make them kind of like the Kings, like
Oh,
everyone's as
yeah.
bad as each other, and I think that they will play a bit better. I actually don't mind watching the Nets without Kyrie. I feel like they're more selfless and they're kind of a bit
Mm.
cooler. With Kyrie, it's like I feel like they're trying a bit too hard, and I feel like they have more pressure on them, and they play worse
Mm.
because of it.
Well said.
Yeah.
That's a nice point, man. Who would be the MVP? My top 2, just looking at this list, I would say you've got Westbrook, you've got Anthony Davis, Paul George, probably Kyle Lowry, and maybe Ben Simmons. Or Tatum.
Yeah, probably Tatum. Tatum or Westbrook, but Westbrook's kind of past it,
Mm.
I think, in some sense. And Tatum, well, MVP, it's not straight stats,
Mm.
And I think that just the way that Tatum's been improving, I think that he'd be very seriously competitive in that race.
Now we've got a defensive player of the year. I think where this is not too affected by this because 2 runners for defensive player of the year are still on their
Yep.
team. So AD and Gobert. I think it could go either way. I don't think it really matters too much. But if you had to
Nah,
pick one, who do you reckon?
probably AD just because he's already
Yeah.
putting up a block show, and
Yeah.
7 a block would be back on prime TV, mate. That's
So if we just go to playoff teams in the East, now I had 6 that I could come up with the rosters they would have. I would say the Pacers, the Celtics, the Heat, the Bucks, the 76ers, and the Raptors. That gives us 6 options. Who else?
the Nets are currently in. They're currently 7th.
That's probably a good point. The Nets is probably another one to go.
I think they'd stay. After that, it really is slim pickings.
Yeah, I mean, the Wizards are not a chance. The
Uh,
Magic, I guess maybe. I mean,
by default. By default only.
yeah, I mean, the other teams, I just can't see it happening. Like Charlotte, I can't see it happening. Chicago, with Kobe White leading them to the 8th spot, I just don't see it happening. Maybe it is Orlando, maybe it is Chicago. I mean,
Chicago with a hot Kobe. That's what I'd say.
or do you see Detroit with Thon Maker? Now he's putting up 15 points a game. Tony
Bloody
Snell.
hell. My goodness. Smell you later.
So the playoff teams in the West, we've got the Lakers probably with AD. We've got the Clippers with Paul George, Rockets with Westbrook, Mavs with KP, Pelicans with
Yeah.
Zion, and Spurs with DeMar DeRozan. Is there anyone else you're seeing?
I think the Suns could be competitive. I actually still think that the Jazz and you didn't have the
Oh yeah,
Nuggets. You didn't have the Nuggets there either. And I still
the
think
Nuggets
that
probably could. Yeah.
I think the Nuggets would be well in there. They're third, mate.
Mm,
They lose the Joker, but I still think that they'd be competitive.
that's very fair. All right, just to round it out then, mate. Best in the East. I've had a look at this, and
Mm,
my answer is going to be the Celtics.
I would go either the Celtics or Toronto, and I don't want to say that. I don't want to say Toronto, but I can't not. I want to say the Heat. Actually, I really love the Heat, and I want them
Mhm,
to be the best in the East. But I actually think that Toronto, especially with the experience of last season, I think that they would be the best, and they're actually even not hypothetically, quite in reality, were
mm.
likely to be the best in the East.
I tell you why. Here's why I like the Celtics is because I like that you can throw you can just basically sub Kemba out for Jalen Brown, and that's still a starting lineup you could throw out in the
Yeah.
NBA pre this vanishing. That's what I like about them. Like Marcus Smart, you can throw that on these garbage point guards that will now be replacing like Trey Young and stuff. Um, so you've just got a nice you can get a shot off from basically 3 out of the 5, and I think that's good enough. So either Celtics or Heat, you reckon? Or Toronto?
No, Toronto. I'd probably say Toronto.
Toronto's your pick.
Yeah.
And in the West, I lineup wise, going player for player, I love the Pelicans.
As best in the West,
Yeah.
you're cooked, mate. You are cooked. I like the Pelicans too, and I like watching them. Don't get me wrong, but as far as
Mm.
best in the West, it's still the Lakers. They're so deep, and yeah, they lose LeBron, but he has been phenomenal this season. But AD single handedly kept the Pelicans alive, and not as bad as they could have been, for the last however many years he was there for.
The reason I like the Pelicans is you've got some nice interchangeability. Like, I think the thing is, like, once all these teams start losing their best player, you have a team here that's like, it just makes sense. You've got Lonzo, who's running around passing the ball. You got Drew, who can catch and shoot. He can also play make. You got Zion, who's kind of like a sort of like thick, short, kind of young Giannis kind of vibe.
Mm.
Like he's just bullies people and he's athletic. And I think, you can throw JJ Redick in there. You can get some good 3-point shooting. I just think, like, as a team, it makes sense, and that's what I like about them. So to round it out, who do you think ends up winning the NBA championship in this hypothetical world, mate? We've got Toronto, we've got Boston, we've got the Lakers, and we've got the Pelicans. That's the semi-finals.
I don't know why you've put the Pelicans in this at all, mate. Honestly, I still think the Lakers win. It's Lakers or Toronto. Celtics at a pinch.
I don't know, like, because I'm looking at the Celtics and I go, I love that lineup again. Like, I look up the lineup and I just go, makes sense in the NBA. You can throw the ball around, you can get a shot off. But I mean, ultimately, the best player has to be probably AD, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
is that enough? And I guess I don't see anyone in Boston. No one can really stop AD. Like, Daniel Tice isn't stopping AD. And probably the same for Toronto. I think the Lakers, just with the fact that no one can stop the man, might have it.
I hazard to agree. I really think that they'd have it, mate. But in this hypothetical world, they'd be serious. It'd be similar to how they're playing now, just without Bron.
All right, mate. Well, that wraps up all the segments I've got here. Is there anything you want to say, just looking at these lineups, anything that's jumped out to you while you were scrolling through and seeing what we've seen?
Nothing too serious. I just say thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure. It's been
mate.
highly entertaining and enjoyable, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Now, obviously, if you've got any hypotheticals you want us to cover, let us know. Otherwise, enjoy watching the NBA's horse competition on YouTube.
Oh, dear.
All right, well, Thom Nixon, thanks for being on the first episode of Hoopathaticals, mate.
No worries, mate. Thanks for having me.